The hum caught in my ribs before the cold did. I didn't think much about the warehouse itself when I first saw it, just another slab of concrete and steel crouched in an industrial park, surrounded by chain-link fence and empty asphalt. But the hum was alive, a vibration bleeding out of the walls, making the night air tremble. It was barely 25 degrees outside, yet the sound made it feel colder, like the whole block was tuned to some sub-zero frequency. I was broke. Rent overdue, heat cut off in my apartment, the cat back home hadn't eaten since yesterday. A temp agency dangled, overnight cold storage, high pay, immediate start. I signed the contract before they finished the sentence. Inside, the overhead sodium lights buzzed, their ballasts whining under uneven load. The concrete floor sweated frost. My boots slipped once before I caught myself. A clipboard waited at the security desk, paper damp with condensation. My pen scratched over the surface. Clock in 10:56 p.m., minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Evap number 3 hummed steady. Frank Holloway stood nearby. Thick shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red. A half-dead cigar clung to his lip, unlit but chewed flat. He tapped one calloused finger against the compressor panel, steady, slow, like he was listening to its pulse. Under the cigar smoke, the air carried a thin ammonia sting, sharp enough to burn the back of my nose. "You the new knight," he said, not a question. I nodded. He pulled a folded slip of paper from his coat and shoved it at me. Grease smears blurred the edges. "Read. Memorize. Don't write it down. Don't talk about it." The paper rattled in my gloved hands, ink bleeding slightly from moisture. Rule 1. Check the freezer doors at 11 o'clock p.m. sharp. If one is open, close it. If none are open, don't touch them. Rule 2. Never answer the loading bay buzzer between 12:30 and 1 o'clock a.m. Rule 3. If you see frost forming on the inside windows of the control room, do not look directly into the glass. Rule 4. Pallet stacks marked with a blue tag must never be moved. If one blocks your path, find another route. Rule 5. At 3:33 a.m., the compressors will go silent. Hold your breath until they start again. Do not inhale the silence. Rule 6. Leave the warehouse floor at 5:55 a.m. Lock yourself in the break room until 6:05. I looked up. "You serious?" Frank didn't blink. "Ignore him, you're meat." He went back to tapping the panel. The break room door groaned. Carla Reyes sat at the metal table inside, head down over a beat-up logbook. She didn't look at me, just chewed mint gum. Crack snap, each pop echoing louder than it should have. On the corkboard above her, a torn OSHA poster curled, edges stiff with frost. Joey Miller leaned against the soda machine. Beanie pushed low, hoodie half unzipped, blonde hair sticking out in messy tufts. He flicked a Zippo open and shut. Snick, clack, snick. Frank grunted, "Rules keep you breathing." Then he walked off, boots crunching frost down the corridor. Joey grinned at me. "Guy's nuts. Rules? This is just a freezer, man." Carla finally raised her head, gum snapping. "Don't joke, not here." Her eyes lingered on me for a second, flat, tired, then dropped back to her logbook. My watch beeped at 10:59. The first rule. I pulled my hood tighter and stepped into the freezer corridor. The hum of the compressors filled the hall, deeper here, pressing into my skull. Steel doors lined the walls, numbers stamped in faded black paint. Frost clung to every seam, every hinge. Each door shuddered slightly, as if something inside pressed outward. My breath smoked white into the dark, exactly 11 o'clock. Door 12, sealed. Door 13, sealed. Door 14, open. An inch gap spill in blackness. My pulse thudded, the paper's words pounded in my head. If one is open, close it. I hesitated. The air beyond the seam was darker than dark, as if it ate the light. I angled the convex mirror toward the CCTV dome above. My reflection warped back at me, pale face stretched. Eyes wide. The monitor in the control booth showed me alone in the corridor, no shadows, no second figure. I gripped the handle. Steel bit through the gloves. I shoved the door closed. Frost squealed. The seal clamped with a hiss. I let out a breath, chest burning. Back in the control room, I checked the feed. The monitor flickered, static crawling in horizontal lines. Then it steadied. What I saw locked my lungs tighter than the cold. On screen, I stood motionless in the corridor, door 14 still gaping open. My hands hung limp at my sides. I blinked, throat dry. I had closed it. I remembered the weight, the hiss of the seal. But the camera disagreed. Cam number 02 timestamp drift. 0.7 seconds. 3 long seconds ticked by, then the feed twitched. The door swung shut. The me on screen lifted his head, slowly, eyes fixing straight into the camera. Behind me, Joey laughed at something on his phone, tinny music leaking from the speaker. Carla snapped her gum, page turning. Normal sounds, in an abnormal night. But the camera said otherwise. Clock in, 10:56 p.m., minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Evap number 3 hummed steady. The first thing the camera taught me was that closing a door doesn't mean it ever really shuts. The image from the monitor in part 1 wouldn't leave my head. My other self staring straight into the lens, the freezer door gaping behind him. I tried to lose myself in manifests, tracing faded ink with my glove, but the thought kept returning. Normal noises, the compressor hum, Joey's tinny music, Carla's gum snapping, felt wrong now. Normal sounds, in a place that wasn't normal anymore. By midnight, Joey's lighter was still clicking open and shut. Snick, clack, snick. Carla chewed slower, the snap of her gum turning damp and tired. The ammonia bite in the air was sharper here near the dock, mixing with the stale hint of Frank's cigar smoke that clung to my jacket. 12:40. The loading bay buzzer shrieked alive. Port! The sound cut through my bones, metal on metal, electric and raw. The air smelled faintly of hot metal and ozone. The Dock 1 fault lamp blinked once, then steadied. Joey grinned. Finally some action. He shoved the Zippo in his pocket and moved toward the door. Carla snapped, "Don't." Her voice cracked like a whip. She stood so fast her chair screeched on the concrete. "You know the rule." Joey laughed. "It's just a buzzer. What if it's a truck?" Carla shot back. "No trucks at night. Not here. Not since." She bit the words off. "Step away." The buzzer hit again, longer, harsher, vibrating the steel panels. I swallowed and checked the monitor. The feed jittered for a frame. Cam number 1 timestamp ticked wrong, 0.7 seconds behind the wall clock. My skin went tight. The buzzer died. Silence for 2 seconds. Then knocking. Clang, clang, measured, deliberate. From inside the dock door, the hair under my hood prickled. "Joey?" My voice rasped dry. "Don't." He grinned wider, hand inches from the latch. "Somebody's in there." Carla moved fast, grabbed his wrist. "Nobody's in there." The steel vibrated under another impact. Then came a scrape, like nails dragging across the frozen sheet. A voice followed. "Joey." Muffled, pressed through thick steel, but clear. "Joey, open up." His hand twitched on the latch. It sounded like his mother. My stomach nodded. "Joey, please, it's cold. Let me in." His lips parted, eyes wide and wet. My fingers brushed the edge of the latch before Carla's glare pinned me still. Her grip tightened on him. "That's not her." The voice shifted, tearing into something jagged. "Joey, open the door." A low sub-bass tremor rippled through the steel like a held breath. The compressor hummed, stuttered under it, then returned. The dock boomed, fists or something harder, hammering from the inside. Frost shook loose from the seams, drifting down like dust. Carla dragged Joey back with both hands. He fought her, shouting, "She needs me." I stared at the steel as it bulged outward, a palm pressed from within, ridges sharp in the frost. Fingers spread wide, trembling against the door. Another hand slammed beside it, this one darker, steaming black against the ice. Not red, not blood, something thicker. It hissed where it met the cold. The buzzer screamed again. Carla's knuckles went white as she hauled Joey away. "Rule 2, she shouted over the noise. "You open that, you're dead." The prints shifted. First they pushed outward, Then, impossibly, they reversed. Palms now turned the wrong way, as if whatever pressed against the metal wasn't inside anymore, but outside, clawing to get in. The steel groaned. Then silence fell like a blanket. The compressor hum reclaimed the air. The handprints stayed. Black frozen stains, fingers spread wide. Joey sagged against the wall, chest heaving. His lighter slipped from his pocket, clattering on the floor. The sound was small, too small for what had just happened. Carla let go of him, trembling, gum slack in her mouth. She whispered to me without looking, "Next time you stop him." I kept staring at the reversed prints, frost glowing faint blue under the sodium light. My gloves were wet with sweat, my breath stuck in my mask. And somewhere, in the buzz of compressors, I could still hear that first voice. The one that sounded like home. Dock number 1 buzzer false trigger, 12:40 a.m. No truck scheduled. The bloody handprints stayed frozen there, palms turned the wrong way, waiting for someone to forget the rule. The handprints on the dock door were still there when we walked back to the control room. Black frozen palms reversed, pressed into the steel, like proof that the metal itself could lie. I didn't want to look at them, but every time my eyes drifted, they were waiting. Carla slammed the control room door shut behind us. The fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed and flickered, pale lights stuttering across the glass wall that overlooked Freezer Corridor B. A thin film of frost had crept across the inside of the observation window, spreading veins across the surface like frostbite under skin. Rule 3. If you see frost forming on the inside windows, do not look directly into the glass. I forced myself to keep my eyes low, on the dull gray concrete. Carla dropped into the chair at the console, gum snapping as she pulled the logbook close. A stick of gum slipped from her mouth, landed on the metal desk with a sharp clack, and froze solid before she picked it back up. Her hand trembled as she shoved it into a crumpled wrapper. Joey wasn't paying attention. He had his phone out again, grinning, trying to angle the camera. "Don't," Carla warned, without looking up. He smirked. "Relax, just a selfie." He lifted the phone toward the frost-covered glass. The veins in the frost twitched. They spread an inch, as if responding to him. I stepped forward, grabbed his sleeve, and yanked him back. "Use the mirror," I said through clenched teeth, reaching for the convex inspection glass mounted by the console. "Seriously?" He laughed. "You sound like Frank. Just do it." The compressors hummed steady. The frost grew anyway, crawling thicker over the window, patterns spiraling into ridges. In the warped convex reflection, the surface of the glass wasn't still. It bulged slightly inward, as though the cold was breathing against it. Carla's pen scratched across paper, filling the log. Her voice was flat. "Don't look straight." Joey leaned closer, ignoring me. His phone screen lit his face blue. For half a second, his expression shifted, not the cocky grin but something younger, smaller. Like he was 8 years old again, staring at a bedtime monster through a cracked door. The frost flexed. I shoved him back harder. His phone clattered to the floor. We all froze. On the other side of the window, something pressed against the frost. A face. But not pressed normally, like it was trapped mid-scream. Skin flattened, eye sockets empty. No skull structure underneath, just soft tissue warped, stretched. Its mouth opened wide in silence, the frost cracked in spiderwebs from the pressure. Then the eyes twitched. White spheres rolled in their sockets, searching. The lips moved, silent words pressing against the glass. In the convex mirror, I caught the movement, the face mouthing my name. Cold bled through my gloves as I gripped Joey's arm harder. "Back," Carla snapped. She slammed the control board, flipping the protective cover over the window switches. "Do not look at it. Do not." I swallowed. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The compressors groaned, dropping pitch for half a breath before steadying again. The frost face blinked. The eyes rolled forward, fixing on me through the glass. Carla hissed, "Don't meet it." Joey shook me off, bent for his phone. The flash clicked by accident. For an instant, the whole control room filled with white. When the light died, the frost was blank again, smooth, cold, empty. But the mirror still showed it, flattened face, eyes still moving, lips still forming my name. The timestamp on the corner of the monitor flickered. Cam number 02 timestamp drift, 0.7 seconds. I grabbed the logbook from Carla's desk and forced my glove against the page, writing without thinking. Do not trust what you see in the glass. My handwriting was jagged, shaky, ink bleeding in the cold. Joey laughed nervously, holding up his phone. See? Nothing there. His screen was cracked from the drop. The photo was black, except for faint white scratches. Not scratches. Letters. M-I-C-A-E-L. My stomach dropped. I shoved the phone away. Delete it. Carla stared at me, gum snapping like a gunshot. You tell me what it said? I shook my head. Couldn't. My breath fogged the glass anyway, like it was trying to answer for me. We didn't go near the observation window again, but even with my back turned, I knew it was still there. Pressing. Waiting. Mouthing my name over and over in the cold. Cam number 02 timestamp drift, 0.7 seconds. The glass stayed blank to the eye, but in the mirror, the frozen face never stopped moving its mouth. We left the control room in silence. The mirror still held that face, even after the glass turned smooth. Joey shoved his cracked phone deep into his hoodie pocket, pretending he hadn't seen the letters spelled across it. Carla chewed hard, gum snapping fast and sharp. Every pop sounded like a warning shot. The compressors hummed steady as we rolled out a forklift to restock Freezer Corridor C. The wheels squeaked over frost lines, leaving trails that refroze in seconds. My breath fogged into a thin cloud under the LED strips overhead. Carla checked the manifest clipped to the board. The ink had run, smeared by condensation. Some entries were scratched out completely. I caught 3 letters stamped faintly at the bottom corner, before her hand covered it. She shoved the board back into the rack. Don't ask. We pushed deeper into the corridor. That's when we saw it. A pallet stack sat dead center in the aisle, shrink-wrapped frosted stiff. On top, a bright blue tag dangled from the strapping like a warning flag. Lafia. Pallets marked with a blue tag must never be moved. If one blocks your path, find another route. Carla's jaw tightened. We take the side passage. Joey laughed, crouching to flick the plastic wrap with his lighter. What, scared of colored tape? Carla snapped, don't touch it. Her voice cracked. She pushed the forklift control into neutral. We'll circle. But Joey stepped forward, grin crooked. Gotta move it anyway. Can't block the lane. He tapped the machine's sensor panel. The forklift beeped awake. The safety laser scanned the pallet, jittered, then froze. Red lines stuttering across the blue tag like it couldn't register. Carla hissed, Joey, stop. He shoved the pallet with his shoulder. It shifted a full foot across the concrete, the wrap squealing as ice cracked loose. The digital scale embedded in the floor lit green. Weight display, negative 143.7 pounds. I blinked. Negative. Carla muttered under her breath, gum snapping so hard it echoed. The wrap split. One of the cartons on top caved inward with a sound like lungs collapsing. Frost hissed out, curling into the air. The box looked empty. No cargo, no product, but the cold air seethed like breath. A white plume rolled out across the floor, low and heavy, curling like exhalation in winter. I froze. It wasn't mist, it was rhythm. Each puff matching an inhale, then exhale as if the empty crate itself was breathing. Jesus. Joey whispered, eyes wide. Hear that? I didn't hear, I felt it. Pressure shifts in my ears, pulses in my chest. My gloves trembled against the steering wheel. Carla yanked Joey backward. Rule 4, she hissed. Back off. He tried to laugh, but the sound died in his throat. The box wheezed again. The frost plume stretched toward his shoes, curling over his laces. He stumbled, dragging himself free, and the breath drew back into the carton like it was disappointed. The scale numbers blinked, flickered, then flatlined. 0.0 pounds. The forklift's display screeched with a warning beep. Error flashed in red. Then the screen went black. I couldn't move. The cold around that pallet wasn't just air anymore. It had weight, pressing into my skin. Carla grabbed my sleeve and jerked me back into motion. We're done here. Side passage now. We left the pallet where it stood, its tag fluttering faintly in the airflow, frost clinging to the edges like veins. As we passed into the side hall, I risked one glance back. The box on top had slumped completely inward, as if something inside had exhaled too hard and deflated the walls. But the frost plume lingered in the air, shaped like a lung, expanding and collapsing in silence. We didn't talk until we were back in the break corridor. Carla lit a cigarette with Joey's Zippo, dragging smoke hard, gum spit out into a frozen wad on the floor. She didn't look at either of us. Don't ever touch a blue tag again. Joey didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the corridor we'd left. I saw his hands shaking when he shoved them into his hoodie. I kept my own hands clenched until the ache in my knuckles cut through the numbness. The compressors droned steady. The hum felt closer now, like it was inside me. Manifest ore and blue tag, smudged note. The empty box still breathed behind us, and the scales had already forgotten it was ever there. The hum carried us through the rest of the aisle. Even after we left the blue tag pallet behind, it still felt like that box was breathing in the dark. I caught myself timing my steps to the compressors, afraid of breaking rhythm. Carla walked ahead with the clipboard clutched tight, the corners of the manifest soaked from condensation. Joey hung back, kicking at frost ridges, trying to whistle, but his breath came out like a leaky kettle. I checked my watch more than once. 3:30 was coming. Every worker I'd spoken to, really just Frank, said the rule wasn't negotiable. When the compressors cut, do not breathe, do not move, do not think, just wait for the hum to come back. I tried to ask why that first night. Frank only gave me the look people give you when you're already dead. 3:33 hit. The hum vanished. Not a fade, not a stagger. 1 second, the metal world shivered with bass. The next, it was an airless box. My eardrums felt naked. Even the lights seemed to dim without the vibration behind them. Carla froze, lips sealed. She pressed her shoulders to the wall, jaw clenched. I mimicked her, forcing my lungs to lock. My chest screamed instantly, but I held. Joey laughed, a short, sharp bark that fogged into the dead air. He inhaled deep, exaggerated, mocking us. The sound tore at me, wet, greedy, loud in the silence. Carla's eyes widened, gum halfway between her teeth and tongue. She shook her head once, violently. Joey grinned, drew in another lungful. See? Nothing. The air answered. A crackle like thin ice splitting rolled down the corridor. Joey staggered, hand clapping to his chest, his grin folded into panic. He tried to cough, but it came out as a brittle snap. His breath cloud turned white, too solid. It crystallized midair and fell in chunks. He doubled over. The sound wasn't coughing anymore. It was shattering. His back convulsed, ribs straining against his hoodie. He choked once, then vomited a thick shard of ice that clattered on the concrete. The shard kept fracturing, shedding slivers like glass. Joey's scream broke into steam, then into nothing at all. His chest ballooned, locked, then sank in. His skin under the frost lamped bluish, frostbite racing up his neck in veins. The silence dragged on. Carla squeezed her eyes shut, fists balled. I wanted to move, wanted to help, but if I opened my lungs, I knew I'd follow him. My throat burned with pressure. Joey clawed at his own hoodie, ripping it open, gasping, but the sound wasn't breath anymore. It was the sound of ice cracking on a lake. His mouth spread wide, and instead of steam, a burst of snow dust billowed out. The compressor hummed back online. Air slammed my eardrums. Carla and I both collapsed against the racks, sucking ragged breaths. Joey didn't breathe. He lay on his side, chest caved inward, lips rimmed with frost, Each tooth rhymed white like a cave stalactite, his eyes glazed, pupils frozen wide. On the floor beside him, the pile of expelled ice still ticked as it cracked, melting slower than it should, like it was alive. Neither of us spoke. Carla pressed the clipboard to her chest so hard it warped. She spit out her gum, and it hit the ice with a brittle click. I tried to close Joey's jacket, but it wouldn't stay. The fabric had stiffened around his torso. My gloves stuck when I touched him, tearing free with a hiss like Velcro. We dragged him to the wall. His body left a glazed trail that steamed in the cold. The hum returned to its steady, endless rhythm. I couldn't stop hearing that snap, though, the sound of lungs freezing from the inside. Compressor bank B silent. 3:33:12 to 3:33:50. The hum had come back for us, but it hadn't come back for Joey. We didn't speak after Joey. There was nothing left to say. Carla led the way down the frozen corridor with her head low, clipboard clenched like a weapon. The hum was steady again, but it had changed for me. It wasn't just machinery anymore. It was a reminder who belonged here and who didn't. The clock ticked toward 5:55. Frank's rule hung in my mind. Lock yourselves in the break room for exactly 5 minutes. Do not come out early. Do not open the door for anyone. I'd thought it was paranoia. Now it was gospel. We passed the racks where Joey had laughed hours earlier. His trail of frost still marked the concrete, a pale glaze like a snail track. My boot slipped once, and Carla's hand shot out, pressing me against the steel upright. Her gloves left a frost print on my sleeve. "Don't look down," she muttered. Her gum snapped hard enough to echo in the aisle. The break room door loomed ahead. Frost haloed the metal frame. Above it, the sodium lamp buzzed like an angry insect. I wiped my gloves on my pants, even though the sweat froze instantly. 5:54. Carla pulled the door open. We stepped inside. The room was small, 2 plastic chairs, a metal table, a bulletin board covered in curling safety posters. One OSHA sheet was torn down the middle, the warning letters obscured by rhyme. Carla slammed the deadbolt home. The click was loud in the stale air. We sat. She pulled a pen from her pocket and began scribbling in the margins of the manifest, gum moving in sharp jerks as she chewed. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying not to count seconds. 5:55. The world outside changed. At first it was only the hum dipping half a tone, a bass line off key. Then came the footsteps, heavy, dragging. They stopped right outside the break room. The door handle twitched, once, twice, then it rattled, violently, like someone trying every angle of the lock. Carla's pen snapped between her fingers. She pressed the clipboard against her chest and mouthed, "Don't move." Then came the voice, "Let me in." It was Joey. His cadence, his cocky drawl, even the way he stretched vowels. I clamped my teeth together. My lungs begged to draw breath, but I didn't want him to hear. "Don't leave me out here," the voice said, louder. "It's freezing. You can't just lock me out." The rattling turned into pounding. The entire frame shook against the cinder block. Frost dust drifted from the seams. Carla sat stone still. Only her jaw moved, grinding the gum. I stared at the door seam. A faint plume of white hissed inward, threading across the floor like a tendril of smoke. It curled toward my boot. I jerked my foot back. "Please," Joey's voice cracked. "I can't breathe." Carla's eyes closed tight. She shook her head once violently. The pounding escalated. Knuckles? No, it was harder, denser, like slabs of ice smashing against steel. The sound sank into my chest. "Open it," the voice roared. The second hand of my watch crawled, my palms burned with sweat inside the gloves. Carla's gum snapped again, sharp as a gunshot. The noise stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was worse. My ears rang with it. For 30 more seconds, nothing moved. Nothing breathed but us. 6 o'clock. The hum leveled back to its rhythm. The light above steadied. Carla reached out, slow as if underwater, and turned the deadbolt. We pushed the door open. The corridor beyond was empty. Only one thing remained, a fragile shell of frost spread on the concrete just outside the threshold, shaped like a body pressed flat. It was Joey's outline, but thinner, almost hollow. The chest area was fractured, as if lungs had burst from inside. Cracks spidered out from the ribcage into the ice. I knelt, reaching one gloved hand toward it. The frost hissed, brittle, and collapsed into powder the moment I touched it. Carla dropped her gum into the powder. The wad vanished instantly, absorbed like it had fallen into snow melt. Neither of us spoke. There was no point. The hum went on, steady as breathing. 5:55 lock. 6 o'clock impact ceased. The corridor looked clean, like nothing had happened at all. Only my gloves stung, frostburn chewing into the fingertips. The floor had erased Joey, but the cracks still ran through my chest. The shift ended, but Frank didn't clock out. Carla was gone before the clock hit 7. Her taillight smeared red against the chain link and disappeared into the sodium haze. I started toward the lot, but Frank's hand clamped my shoulder. His glove was stiff, crusted with frost like it had been left in a deep freeze. "Stay," he said. I didn't argue. The compressors rolled steady under the concrete, a bass note that never stopped. The warehouse had gone hollow without Joey's noise, like the racks themselves were holding their breath. Frank pulled a folded manifest from his vest and flattened it on the desk. The paper was warped, damp at the edges. Most of the ink was blurred, blue lines drowned in moisture. One block stood out, scrawled over in thick black marker. "Blue zone, do not enter." His glove creaked against the sheet, and frost feathered outward from his knuckle, like the words themselves leaked cold. "If you see it, you keep walking. Don't touch. Don't log. Don't ask." He still hadn't looked at me. The weight in his voice was heavier than any of the rules he'd handed me night one. I glanced at the break room corkboard. The OSHA poster curled further off its tack, half the warning lost to frost. Carla's logbook lay open on the table, her pen ruts so deep they gouged through the page. Like she was trying to leave a mark the warehouse couldn't erase. Frank slid the manifest back into his vest and finally met my eyes. His pupils reflected the light too cleanly, like glass. "Understand?" I nodded. My breath fogged between us and vanished before it rose. A crackle snapped from the control monitors. Cam number 3 glitched, cyan and magenta bands sliding down the frozen aisle. The timestamp blinked, stuck at 3:47:21. A solid 0.7 seconds behind the wall clock above. Frank walked over and tapped the panel twice with his knuckle. Not hard. The picture jerked, then caught up, pretending nothing had happened. "You'll see this more," he said. "It's the system checking if you're watching." I didn't ask what he meant. The feed jumped again. Static ripped across the screen, then cleared. The aisle came back. Only this time it wasn't empty. Someone stood past the frost line, and it was me. Shh. Same hood, same gloves, same tilt of the shoulders. My breath locked. I hadn't moved from Frank's side, but there I was, frozen on screen. The double turned its head slow as if the air pressed against it and locked eyes with the lens. For a blink I thought it was waiting for me to move first. Frank slapped the panel. The screen died in static snow. The compressor hum swallowed the silence it left behind. "You've already stayed longer than most," he said, flat. He adjusted his vest and walked toward the inner doors. I wanted to follow, to demand answers, but my throat stayed locked. The sodium buzz carried on. The compressors cycled steady. The warehouse pretended nothing had happened. At 7:03 I signed out. Frank never did. Log, shift end, 7:03 a.m. Frank stayed on premises. Carla waited for me at the chain link after shift, arms crossed, gum dead between her teeth. Her eyes were ringed red from a night without sleep, but she didn't look tired. She looked wired, like the hum was still inside her bones. "You saw it too," she said. Not a question. I didn't answer. She hooked her thumb toward the warehouse. "Blue zone. We're going." I should have walked away. After Joey. After Frank's silence, after the monitor double, I should have never gone back inside, but the way she said it, flat and certain, pulled me behind her through the sodium fog. The loading dock loomed dead, the buzzer light dark, frost feathered from the seams. Carla swiped her badge. The door unlocked with a hollow click. Inside, the compressor still droned, steady as a machine heart. We passed the break room. Her logbook lay open on the table, pen marks gouged through paper like trenches, like she'd been trying to dig a way out with ink. She didn't look at it. The farther we walked, the thicker the air grew. Not cold, dense. My chest tightened like pressure built against my lungs. My breath hit short, shallow. This way. She led me down an unlit corridor. The fluorescents above flickered and died in sequence as we passed, leaving only the blue LED strips near the floor. The hum deepened, rolling lower than the compressors ever went, rumbling inside my ribs. At the end of the hall, a door half open. Frost had colonized the hinges, blooming white across the steel. Someone had tried to weld it shut once. The beads of failed weld still clung like frozen tears. Carla pushed it with her shoulder. The metal groaned but gave. The blue zone wasn't a zone, it was a canyon. Racks climbed higher than anywhere else in the warehouse, so tall the ceiling disappeared into vapor. Pallets stacked floor to height, sealed in wrap gone opaque with frost. Each carried the same stenciled code, black letters beneath the ice, Orion Cryo Hum. The tags had bled, ink spidering under moisture. Some smeared so badly the letters looked more like veins than print. The air crushed tighter. I gasped, but the oxygen felt thin, wrong. My chest ached as if it wasn't air I was pulling, but cold slurry. Carla pointed. Listen. At first I thought it was the hum. Then I heard it under the hum, a cadence, slow, shallow, inhale, exhale. The pallets were breathing. Frost pulsed on the plastic wrap in and out like lungs pressing against plastic, a sound like glass flexing with every cycle. I staggered back, boots slipping on a thin sheen of ice. My glove brushed one pallet. The plastic dented inward, then snapped back. A plume of frost hissed out, biting my skin through the nitrile. Inside, behind the blur of frost, a shape shifted. Not cargo, not boxes. Eyes. 2 of them. Just wide enough apart to be human, blinked, slow. Frost crusted the lashes, but the lids moved, mechanical and stubborn. They closed, opened, looked directly at me. I jerked away, my spine hitting cold steel. The racks rattled, chain links quivering as if the whole zone flexed with the movement. Carla's voice cracked low. They're not storing food here. The hum surged, a sub-bass wave. The frost lamps above flared blue, casting the aisle in color that didn't belong to any daylight spectrum. Something ticked on Carla's monitor, clipped to her belt. Ambient, negative 26 degrees Fahrenheit. NH3 spike, 14 ppm. The numbers bled red on the screen, warning out of range. I swallowed hard, but my throat felt frozen. We shouldn't. Her hand cut the air. She wasn't chewing gum anymore. Her jaw locked. We stood in the blue zone aisle, both staring at pallets that breathed, plastic rattling with each impossible exhale. The eyes behind the frost didn't close this time. They waited. The compressors surged. The air went denser still. My lungs rebelled. I couldn't take another breath. Carla dragged me back by my sleeve before I collapsed. We stumbled into the corridor, the door to the zone grinding shut behind us. The hum steadied again. Air filled my lungs, sharp, metallic, tasting like ammonia and blood. We didn't speak as we walked back to the main floor. But every time I blinked, I saw them. Eyes locked open, rimmed in frost, waiting for me in the plastic. Log, ambient negative 26 Fahrenheit, NH3 spike 14 ppm. We didn't talk on the way out of the zone. Carla's boots scraped hard, like she wanted each step to drown the sound of the pallets breathing. My ribs still ached from air that hadn't been air. The dock doors glowed faint orange under sodium lamps, the lot beyond still black. I thought for a second we'd actually walk free. Then I heard it. The rattle of casters. One pallet jack rolling slow, no hands on it. Its rubber wheels squeaked against the polished concrete, deliberate as footsteps. A wrapped pallet sat balanced on it, plastic creaking, frost dust shaking loose in tiny crystals. It wasn't supposed to move. The dock had been locked, no truck scheduled. But the jack rolled itself off the yellow line and toward us. Carla froze. She crossed herself, glove creaking. Holy Mother. The jack halted mid-floor, like it had heard. The hum fell quieter, compressors shifting to a low idle. Every other noise thinned until all I heard was my own pulse in my ears. The pallet turned, slow grinding, and the stenciled code faced me. Orion, cryo, hum. The plastic wrap pulsed once, as if something inside had sighed. Then the dock monitor lit by itself. Cam number 5, feed from the bay. At first it showed the pallet on screen, still as any cargo. Then the lens flexed, static hissed, colors bleeding wrong. And the pallet on the monitor pivoted faster than the one in front of us, lining up square to the camera, square to me. The thermal printer under the panel chattered awake. I hadn't seen it run once in my weeks there. Dust shook off as the rollers seized. A strip of glossy white slid out, heat smudged. I caught the edge before it fell. It was warm. A Polaroid. The image smeared into being. Fog gray. Then sharper. My stomach turned. It was me. Not now me. Not standing at the panel holding the photo. Me wrapped in plastic, shoulders pressed against pallet wood, frost crawling my cheek. My eyes half open, glazed in rime, staring out as if I'd been stored for weeks. The floor scale beside the dock clanged alive, red LEDs ticking. Numbers jittered, then locked. Minus 187.2 pounds. Carla backed away. Gum long gone, her jaw shaking. It's writing you in. The pallet jack creaked forward another foot. The plastic ruffled as if breath had caught inside. I dropped the Polaroid. It hit concrete face up, the ice version of me staring at the ceiling. The dock monitor twitched again. A second image flashed. Frame lagged, cyan and magenta bands across it. For half a second, I swear the frozen me blinked. Carla grabbed my sleeve. We have to go. The compressors surged high, rattling the racks. The hum cut through my chest like a drill. The Polaroid curled in on itself, heat still bleeding from its edges. Frost spread where it lay, seeping outward in a halo. We staggered back down the aisle, leaving the photo on the floor. The pallet jack didn't follow. It just stood. Plastic flexing, like it was waiting for the system to catch up. When we reached the break room, Carla slammed the door, her gloves leaving wet smears on the handle. I leaned against the wall, throat raw. The monitors above us cycled manifests. 3 identical entries stacked on screen. Same consignee, same weight, same name, log, manifest entry duplicated, same consignee thrice. The Polaroid stayed under my skin. I kept tasting plastic. Carla didn't mention it, but every time her eyes flicked at me, it was like she'd already read the manifest 3 times over. We tried to finish the shift like nothing had changed. Scan temps, tick off crates, circle weights on paper. The compressors hummed steady above, that mechanical heartbeat we'd started to trust more than our own. 3:33 hit. The hum cut. Not a fade, a snap. One moment my ribs rattled, the next they were empty. Silence pressed like a hand inside my skull. Carla dropped her pen. It clicked once against the tile and rolled into the dark. She grabbed the rail and held, jaw set, chest locked. Rule 5, don't breathe, don't move, wait for the hum. I clamped my teeth, lungs already burning. My hands trembled in the cold. Then the PA clicked. Dust had filmed the speaker grills all week. They hadn't cracked once. Until now. A sub-bass note dropped so low it shook marrow. Pipes thrummed overhead, racks creaked, my vision wobbled like glass. Then came the buzzer. Dock 1. Brrrt. Red lamp pulsed over the bay, and under the drone came the voice. Open it. Hey, it's me, Joey. Clear. Whole. Not the boy who had frozen from the inside. Carla's head whipped at me, eyes wide, lips shaping. Don't. The sound climbed. It's me, come on, I'm freezing out here. The sub-bass jumped, rattling the panel. My chest screamed. My teeth ached. Then, please, Mom's waiting. It wasn't Joey's voice anymore. Not to me. It was hers. The panel flickered half a second off like the monitors had. My fingers slipped on the cold plastic and found the release. The latch clanked. The dock door cracked an inch. That was enough. The blast hit like razors of dry ice. It sliced my lip open. The taste of iron froze solid. My scream frosted to vapor before it left my throat. The lamp above Dock 1 went steady red. On the console, code strobed. Fault B red. PAOVR01 sh. Dock 1 mic live. Carla ripped my arm back, slammed the latch down with both gloves. The bay sealed, metal ringing. The PA cut. All that was left was the cold. My glove tore when I pulled away, fabric fused to my mouth. Frost welded cloth to skin. Carla's face was wet, but her voice came hard. Don't touch it again. The hum came back then, rattling racks, shaking dust loose from the lights. The hum came back. My blood stayed in the lines. Log. Compressor silence 333.09 to 333.44. PA override plus buzzer 333.18. Dock latch partial 333.29. Carla hadn't chewed gum in 3 nights. I only noticed when I caught myself waiting for a snap that never came. We didn't talk about the dock, or the Polaroid, or my blood freezing on the latch. She just wrote. Every cycle. Pen grinding trenches into her logbook, like ink could survive where people couldn't. At 5:55, she should have been in the break room. Door locked. Rule 6. Instead, she was standing in front of a blue tag palette. Joey's lighter trembling in her glove. I can't keep doing this, she said, voice flat. I reached for her wrist. My glove tore where it stuck to my split lip. By the time I freed myself, the flame was already against the wrap. Plastic shrank. For a breath it caught, orange light flaring in the blue cold. Then the fire died. Not guttered, died. Snuffed flat, as if the oxygen had been pulled from the room. The LCD above the dock buzzed to life. No input, no cable, just a cyan square swimming with static. Frost spread inside it, veins webbing until the whole pane gleamed white. The air around it snapped colder than the freezers. Carla stumbled back into the screen. Her jacket froze stiff. Her gloves welded to the glass. The crack that followed wasn't the monitor, it was her arms. Her mouth opened, but no sound left. Her own breath plated across her face, splitting her skin pale. The frost pulled, not with hands, with hunger. She stiffened as heat drained out of her chest. Fog swallowed her shape. Her eyes found mine once through the frost. Then they blinked. Again, faster, until they vibrated in the ice, trapped in a loop. Then she was gone. The monitor went dark, the frost pane smooth, the lighter lay on concrete, still faintly warm. Her logbook was in her jacket, which meant the entry was already written. Log 6:00 a.m., Carla absent from roster. The hum shifted after Carla, slower, deeper, like it had synced to something else. It carried in my ribs like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. The warehouse was empty, but not quiet. Frost drifted from the rafters. Blue tag wrap crinkled in the aisles though no one walked them. I followed the sound of compressed breathing like lungs until the break room door blocked me. The lock was latched from the inside. No lights on, no voices. She should have been inside. The lock knew that. The corkboard was bare. OSHA poster gone, Carla's logbook missing. The clock-out sheet lay pinned under a clipboard, but the last line already had my name. Tomorrow's date. My hand hovered. The ink looked wet. I touched it, warm. I tried to pull away. The hum pressed forward. My boots scuffed, then slid. Every camera feed flickered cyan, then magenta. Timestamp always 0.7 seconds late. In each monitor, I was already further ahead than I really was. A pallet jack sat mid-aisle, wrapped tight in green film, blue tag stapled. The wrap unsealed itself, not torn, unzipped. Plastic side open to a rib-shaped cavity rhymed with frost. The compressors dropped to silence. For 0.7 seconds. No sound. No time. Then the hum surged back, deeper than before, locking in my chest. I coughed, and steam crystallized on my lips. My boots crossed the dock line. Hands slack, I stepped into the cavity. The plastic folded back over me without touch. Inside, the cold wasn't cold anymore. It was still, absolute. My lungs froze on the hum, the compressor cycling me into stock. Log, shift closed, file reassigned. Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Dr. Noctis for more horror stories from the dark.